Ocracoke never really changed. The breeze still came in with the same salt-heavy sighs, and the tide still rolled with the same lazy rhythm it had since my childhood. I used to think that predictability was a kind of safety. I know better now. I was 37, unmarried, childless, and alone by most people's standards. But I had the Celine Star. That boat wasn't just fiberglass and paint. It was a promise I made to myself the year I stopped waiting on anyone else to build me a life. People in this town had their own ideas about a woman on a boat. She's either recently widowed or recently crazy, I'd overheard once at the general store. I wasn't either. But owning that boat turned me into both in their eyes, eventually. It had taken me 7 years, 2 waitressing jobs, and more double shifts than I could count to afford her. She wasn't flashy, no gleaming deck or shiny brass, just sturdy, clean, and reliable, just like I'd had to become. I bought her from an old man who said she'd never seen a woman handle her quite right. He changed his mind after I backed her out of the slip without a scrape. That day, the sun was out, the wind perfect, and the silence in my head was finally quiet in a good way. It was the first time I'd felt the hum of something I owned under my feet. When I got home, my father didn't congratulate me. He glanced over the registration papers and muttered, "You're not a man, Celine. Don't go acting like you are." That stayed with me longer than it should have. I didn't talk much about the boat after that. Didn't bring it up at Sunday dinners. Not that I went often, or with neighbors. I just took it out, fixed her when she needed it, tied every rope myself. She didn't ask anything of me I wasn't willing to give. Maybe that's why she lasted. Last month, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was syrupy sweet, which I'd learned to translate as prepared ambush. She invited me for dinner. "Just us, nothing formal. You haven't been by in a while." I said yes. Stupid, I know. Dinner was meatloaf and awkward silence. Clementine, my older brother, sat across from me like a man on a mission. It wasn't until the plates were cleared that he started in. "So, about the boat." I didn't answer. He continued anyway. "We've been thinking," he said, glancing at our parents. "There's a good opportunity here. We could turn it into a family tour business. Island hopping, fishing charters, nothing big, just a joint venture." My fork scraped my plate. "A joint venture?" "Yeah, just between us. You've already done the legwork. We'd just add the branding, and you'd keep using it, of course, just under the family name." My mother chimed in, eyes too wide. "It's not like you're doing much with it, honey. This way, everyone wins." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "No." The room stilled. My father looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "Excuse me?" I said, "No. It's mine. It's in my name. I paid for it." "You're breaking this family apart over a piece of metal," my mother said later, when she found me in the kitchen rinsing my plate. "You've always been so difficult." I wiped my hands on the towel slowly. "Because I won't hand over the one thing I've built by myself?" "You know that's not what I meant." "I don't think you know what you mean either." She sighed like she carried the weight of the world. "You were never like Clementine. He never questioned where he belonged." "No," I said quietly, "because you never let him feel unwanted." On the drive home, I thought about that night when I was 9 and begged to go out with Clementine and Dad on their fishing trip. They told me to stay home, said I'd get seasick, that the boat was a boy thing. I sat on the porch with my plastic rod and watched the driveway stay empty until dark. At the dock the next morning, Joe, the harbor master, leaned on the railing. "So, Celine," he said, "your brother's tour's booking up fast?" I blinked. "Tours?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a Facebook ad. There was the Celine Star, clear as day, floating proud under the text. "Short Island Adventures, Captain Clementine." My brother's name. I couldn't breathe. I never agreed to that. Joe raised his brows. "Oh, didn't know. Figured you were in on it." I wasn't. But apparently, everyone else thought I was. That night, I sat on my porch and stared at the boat slip, lit by a dim street lamp. The boat wasn't in the water. It was still being stored for seasonal maintenance. But I saw it in my mind. Strangers stepping on her deck, my name erased from her sides, my story rewritten without me. I pulled out the registration papers again. My name, Celine Tenton, typed cleanly across the top. I ran my fingers over it, memorizing each letter. I wasn't going to let them take this. They called. I didn't answer. Instead, I started collecting. Screenshots of the ads, comments under the posts, texts from mom hinting I was being selfish. I wrote it all down. Silence ain't weakness, girl. It's the sound before a storm. My grandfather used to say that. I believed him now. A week later, I went to check on the Celine Star. It was a chilly morning, just after sunrise. I parked and walked toward the dry dock, then froze. Clementine and Dad were there. They had the storage door open and were loading boxes of equipment into the cabin. Coolers, branded signage, fishing poles, all without a word to me. I stood behind the corner of the tool shed, watching. No one looked in my direction. No one checked if I was nearby. To them, I wasn't. The boat bobbed slightly as Clementine stepped on board like he owned her. He laughed at something Dad said. The sound scraped across my nerves. I didn't step forward. I didn't shout. I stood still, heart thudding, and whispered to no one. So this is how it starts. The sun hadn't climbed far when I walked down to the dock the next morning, coffee in hand, and a wrench sticking out of my back pocket. Maintenance on the Celine Star gave me clarity. I liked tightening bolts, checking cables, running my hands along her hull like I was whispering, "Still mine." Joe, the old-timer who ran the bait shop near the marina, stood a few feet from my boat, nodding like he had something clever stuck behind his teeth. "Heard your brother's tours are selling out," he said, not even looking up from the rope he was coiling. My steps paused. "Clementine's what?" "His boat tours," he chuckled. "Saw it all over Facebook last night. Got that fancy page up. What did he call it? Short Island Adventures?" I set my coffee on the railing. "Joe, are you telling me Clementine is offering paid tours using my boat?" Joe blinked, then reached into his jacket for his phone. "Well, shoot, I just assumed y'all were doing it together." He tapped and turned the screen toward me. There it was, my boat, my lines, my colors, my name scraped off in a digital blur and replaced with some cheesy script logo. Captain Clementine, it read, beneath a bright filtered photo of him, arms folded like he'd birthed the whole thing himself. It wasn't just one picture. There were 7, 8, even one of me, cropped at the neck, showing the boat's interior. The wicker cooler I'd hand-wrapped, the cushions I'd sewn last fall, they were all there. My jaw clenched. "Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it." He nodded, oblivious, and I walked away fast. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling but eyes sharp. I pulled up the Facebook page, Short Island Adventures. There were dozens of comments already, locals excited for his new venture. This town's needed a family-run island tour for years. Can't wait to ride Celine's old boat. Clementine bringing something fresh to the harbor? I couldn't breathe right. These people thought he'd built it, thought I'd just handed it over like a good little sister. He'd been in my house once to help fix my computer. That was the same week he offered to back up my files. I remember now how long he took, how he smiled too wide when I thanked him. I stared at the screen, the tightness in my chest pressing deeper. It was never his to advertise, I whispered. I paced the kitchen for a long time, trying to shake the feeling crawling under my skin. Was this always the plan? Make me feel selfish, unreasonable, so when he took the boat, no one would question it. I grabbed the boat title from my drawer, my name, still printed in black and white, and the legal proof they hadn't yet touched. I took pictures of it, saved copies to my email, and then started screenshotting every single post, comment, tag, and ad. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was collecting receipts. I backed it all up on a flash drive and 2 separate cloud accounts. Evelyn's voice echoed in my head. Paper trail, always. Emotion gets sympathy. Evidence gets results. That night, as I was scrolling through yet another ad with my boat plastered all over it, a text alert popped up. It was from my mother. Only it wasn't meant for me. She'd accidentally added me to a group chat. The name of the chat? Keeping the boat in the family. My thumb hovered over the screen, breath held. I didn't move, just scrolled. Clementine. We need to move before she gets difficult. Mom. Make it look like she's agreed. She's emotional, not strategic. Dad, I'll handle the title later. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Not one of them hesitated. Not one asked, "Is this right?" They were planning around me like I was a faulty appliance, not a person. I took screenshots, all of it. The chat stretched back weeks, plans made while I was left out of family dinners, jokes made about how I wouldn't even notice if they switched the decals. There were messages from an old high school friend of Clementine's, someone in local tourism, offering to connect them with influencers. My mother sent photos she'd pulled from my social media, pictures of me smiling on deck, now repurposed for the narrative. No tears came, just a kind of frozen stillness, like my body refused to waste energy on shock. I wasn't excluded. I was targeted. I paced the hallway like a panther in a too-small cage, phone in one hand, that heavy silence pressing down like a storm front. My first instinct was to call, blast them all on speaker, demand explanations, curse them in the way they'd never heard from me. But something deeper said, "Wait, watch." Let them dig deeper. Let them keep thinking I'm quiet. I backed up the entire chat to 3 different places. I even printed a hard copy and placed it inside a folder with a post-it that read, "In case I start doubting myself again." I began drafting a timeline. Not just recent events, everything. From the first time Clementine borrowed money and never paid it back, to when Mom told me, "You don't need boundaries with blood," after I said no to a family trip I couldn't afford. It hit me slowly, like water seeping through a crack in the dam. I had never been too sensitive. I had been conditioned not to notice. They weren't my family anymore. They were they. The next morning, just before sunrise, I drove to the marina. I parked a few spots back from the main dock, leaned the seat back, and watched through the windshield. Clementine was on my boat, the Celine Star, wearing a polo embroidered with that cursed logo. A group of tourists boarded behind him, laughing, sipping coffee from branded tumblers. One woman took a selfie and tagged it, "Captain Clem." I hit record on my phone. He walked across my deck like he built it, gave a speech about tides and local history as if he'd ever read a map in his life. The boat swayed, carrying people who had no idea they were standing on theft disguised as charm. I whispered, steady and quiet, "That's the last ride you'll ever steal from me." The drive was meant to clear my head. No destination, just motion. Something about the road makes betrayal easier to breathe through. But I wasn't thinking clearly. My hands gripped the wheel too tightly, and my eyes kept drifting to the passenger seat, half expecting some answer to be sitting there. I didn't realize where I'd ended up until I saw the cracked metal sign. The paint had chipped away, but I still recognized it. The park, the one with the broken swing set and the crooked water fountain that never worked. The one where I was left at 9 years old after an argument I barely remember now. I parked, stepped out, and just stood there. I hadn't been back since. The grass was overgrown. One of the benches had a plank missing, and the old blue slide, still rusted around the edges, leaned a little more to the left than I remembered. I walked slowly, like my legs weren't fully convinced I wanted to do this. Back then, I'd called it punishment. Mom and I had argued. I'd said something smart, apparently, and she told me to wait while she cooled off. She drove off. No time, no explanation. 4 hours, no cell phone, no money, just the slow realization that she wasn't coming back right away, that maybe she wouldn't come back at all. That was the day I learned people didn't always yell when they wanted to hurt you. Sometimes they just left you where they thought you belonged. Now, staring at the empty bench, I felt that same stillness settle into my chest. I sat, closed my eyes, let the memory run its course. They've always known how to make absence feel like a lesson. The more I thought about it, the clearer the pattern became. I wasn't being paranoid. I was remembering. That group chat wasn't an accident. The ad with my boat wasn't a slip-up. None of this was sudden. It had been rehearsed. "When someone vanishes long enough," I whispered, "you stop expecting them to come back." I opened my phone and stared at the screenshots again. I read Clementine's words, my mother's responses, my father's silent agreement. I realized I'd been trained to believe silence meant safety, that if I didn't stir the pot, I'd stay in the room. But the truth was, I'd already been written out of the script. I'd just never read the pages. At home, I pulled out my storage box, the one with old documents, dusty receipts, and every contract I'd ever signed that held an ounce of meaning. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I had to look. Halfway through the stack, I found a file from my grandfather's estate. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside was a copy of the land deed he'd left to be shared among both grandchildren. But something was off. One line, my name, had been scratched out in black pen. The remaining name, clean and untouched, was Clementine's. I stared at the ink. The handwriting, familiar, steady. It looked like Dad's. No official notarization, just a copy, but enough to make my stomach twist. I held the paper like it might burn. It didn't feel like theft. It felt like a sentence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an edit. I laid everything out on the floor, labeled each document, set up a timeline. Year the land was reassigned. Year Clementine borrowed that $5,000 I never saw again. When the Facebook ads began, when the group chat thread started, when the boat name was filed at the harbor office. The deeper I dug, the more dots I connected. I saw the invisible hands pulling strings around me, writing a version of my life I hadn't agreed to star in. I scribbled a quote on the back of an envelope and taped it above my kitchen sink. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt. I read it twice, then added underneath, I revoke my consent. One night, years ago, there was a dinner. Clementine's birthday. I wasn't invited, said it was a last-minute thing. Mom swore it was an oversight. Don't be dramatic, Celine. It's just dinner. That night, I scrolled through Facebook and saw them all. Candles lit, my seat empty. The caption said, "Family is who shows up." That line stuck like glass behind my ribs. They weren't forgetting me. They were phasing me out, like an old chair too squeaky to keep. I used to believe the boat was just a boat, but now I saw it for what it really was, a boundary. The first time I said no, I'd spent years saying yes, lending money, skipping plans, covering shifts, keeping quiet when they used guilt like a leash. But the boat, that was mine. Saying no was the first time they had to see me as a person, not a placeholder, not the reliable spare part, just me, and they didn't like that. Because if I could say no to one thing, maybe I'd say no to the rest. I walked into the grocery store for milk and paper towels. Simple errands, mundane things. Then I saw her, Cheryl, my mother. She was in the produce section, inspecting apples like the world hadn't shifted. Her smile came fast, too fast. "Celine, sweetheart, we've all been so worried." I blinked. "Worried? Since when?" She ignored that. "Why don't you come by for dinner this Sunday? Just the family. Let's talk this through like adults." I forced a smile. "Sure, let's talk." She patted my arm and walked off, pulling her phone from her purse before she even turned the corner. Her thumbs moved fast. I didn't need to see the screen to know what she was doing. My pulse picked up, not from panic, from confirmation. They were setting something up. Again. I called my mother first. Straight to voicemail. Then Clementine. Same thing. I didn't try again. I left the messages clearly, calmly. "Hi, Mom. I saw the new ad. I saw the updated schedule. I saw the lies." I paused, took a breath. "I'm giving you a chance to stop before this becomes something you can't undo. Take the boat down. Remove the listings. Don't push this any further." Click. Then Clementine. "You've got 24 hours to pull back. That's not a threat. It's a line in the sand." I stared at my phone for a while. No buzzing. No notifications. No apologies. In my gut, I knew they wouldn't call back. They'd always been better at pretending they hadn't heard than admitting they were wrong. Maya Angelou's voice popped into my head. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I'd had 37 years of introductions. I opened the kitchen drawer and pulled out a folder labeled House Stuff. That's where I'd shoved the old receipts and notes no one ever looks at, until they have to. There it was. The envelope with the name Clementine scribbled on the back. I opened it and stared at the check carbon. 5 years ago, I'd written him a personal check for $3,000. Temporary, he'd said. His car had broken down, and I, like an idiot, had just canceled a weekend trip to Asheville to cover it. He never paid me back. I'd asked once, about a month after, and he laughed. "Come on, Celine. You know I'll get you back when I can. That's what family's for, right?" Mom had said the same thing when I brought it up at dinner later. "Honey, it's not about the money. It's about love. He needed help. You were in a position to give it." And I'd swallowed it, like I always did. Love to them meant convenience. Every time I gave, it was praised. Every time I hesitated, I was called cold. Now that I was saying no loudly, they were treating it like an act of violence. I stood by the sink and stared out the window. The marina glimmered faintly in the distance. My boat, sitting in silence, waiting for a storm no one else saw coming. I remember being 24 when they tried to marry me off. His name was Mason. My mother adored him. "He's a good provider," she'd said, clasping her hands like it was the end of some movie where I ride off in a minivan and settle down 2 blocks from her house. But I didn't love Mason. Hell, I didn't even like him. He was the kind of man who called every woman ma'am, but couldn't name a single book written by one. When I broke off the engagement, it wasn't a scandal, it was treason. "You just threw away the best thing that ever happened to you," Dad had muttered, not even looking up from his paper. For years after that, I was the selfish one. The difficult daughter. The stubborn girl who'd rather eat alone than swallow expectations. Now I could see it clearly. They didn't want me to be safe. They wanted me to be obedient. I pulled out my old journal, shoved in the back of the hall closet. Dust coated the cover like a dare. I flipped through pages I barely remembered writing until I found it. Folded, creased, still sealed. The letter I never sent. It was dated 2 weeks after I'd broken off the engagement. I opened it slowly. "Mom, Dad, I know you think I ruined something good, but you don't know what it felt like to pretend I was happy just to make you proud. I'm not your mirror. I don't exist to reflect your expectations. I exist to build my own life." I read it to the end, heart steady, breath strong. I copied that last line onto a sticky note and placed it on my desk. Then I opened a blank Word document and started typing. To whom it may concern, this letter serves as an official cease and desist notification. I stated it clearly. I was the sole legal owner of the Celine Star. Any usage of the vessel, promotional or operational, without my explicit consent, would be met with legal consequences. No drama, no pleas, just the facts. I emailed it to Clementine, CC'd both my parents. Then I printed 2 copies. One I filed with Evelyn. The other, I drove over to Clementine's and dropped into his mailbox, recording myself doing it with a time-stamped video. On the envelope, I wrote, "This is not a threat, it's a boundary." And underneath, "I owe you love. I don't owe you silence." 3 days passed. No reply, but the posts kept coming. Clementine uploaded a new video of a group boarding the Celine Star, laughing, posing, calling him Captain Clem. Then Mom posted on her Facebook wall, "A daughter who forgets where she came from will never know where she's going." I didn't flinch. Just screenshotted it and dropped it in my folder. They were waging war in whispers, smiles and scripture, pity and innuendo. "So this is what it looks like," I murmured. "Not knives, narratives." That afternoon, I went to see Evelyn. Her office hadn't changed. Still smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. She looked up from her screen and raised a brow. "You look like you've been walking through fire." They threw a match. I built a file. I handed her the envelope, sat down, and exhaled. She read in silence. Then, "You're not crazy, Celine. You're cornered, and corners breed fighters." She tapped her pen against the desk. "If they don't back off, we file." I nodded. No tears. No shaking. "Let them laugh," I said. "Let them think I'm being dramatic." I stood, smoothed my jacket. "Let them?" Cheryl called me on Thursday morning. Her voice was warm, careful, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. "Celine, honey, we were thinking of doing something nice this Saturday. Just us. A little outing on the boat, like old times." My hand tightened around the phone. "On my boat?" She laughed too fast. Don't start. I just meant we could all use a little air. Reset, you know? I didn't answer right away. Please come, she added. We'll bring sandwiches, no expectations, just some time together, like we used to. I said yes. Then called Evelyn. Record everything, she said. Charge your phone, pack backup, trust your gut. So I did. I packed quietly, deliberately. Portable charger, a copy of the boat's registration, a backup cell phone Evelyn had lent me months ago. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew something would. They've never been this nice, I told myself as I zipped up the bag, unless something's about to go wrong. That morning, I pulled into my parents' driveway a few minutes early. The house looked the same. Fresh coat of paint, trimmed hedges, still trying to pass for stable. I walked inside without knocking. Back here, sweetie, Mom called from the kitchen. On the way, I passed the hallway. That's when I saw it. A new frame on the wall, gold, polished, centered perfectly between two sconces. Inside was a large photo, maybe 11-14. My family. All of them, standing proudly in front of the Celine star. But not me. I took 2 steps closer. The photo had been doctored. It was clear. The edges around Clementine's shoulder were blurred, like someone had airbrushed space. The light didn't match across faces. My face, my place, had been removed. I stared at it. Cheryl entered with a thermos and saw where my eyes had landed. Oh, that, she said with a laugh. It was just a quick edit. The original lighting was all over the place, nothing intentional. I turned to her slowly. You edited me out. Sweetheart, don't make this into something. I was in that photo. She didn't answer. Just handed me the thermos. Lemon water? I didn't take it. I took a mental photograph instead, of the frame, the placement, the look on her face when she realized I'd noticed. We rode in silence to the marina. Dad drove. Clementine was already there, prepping the boat like he hadn't read the cease and desist I sent him 2 weeks ago. No one brought it up. Let's just enjoy today, Mom said as we boarded. No more tension, okay? Clementine was too cheerful, blasting classic rock from a Bluetooth speaker and handing out cans of soda like he was some kind of party host. Dad barely spoke. His eyes stayed mostly on the horizon. We pushed off and rode for about 30 minutes before docking at a small barrier island just offshore. Picnic time, Clementine announced. We unpacked. Sandwiches, chips, a single thermos of tea, but no water bottles, no bug spray, no gear. No one else brought a phone. Where's the cooler? I asked. Clementine grinned. We won't be long. Just some peace and quiet, like the good old days. My jaw tightened. What good days? Mom laughed. Too light. Don't ruin the mood. I walked the perimeter of the island, pretending to look at shells. I slid my phone out of my back pocket and texted Evelyn my coordinates. If I don't text again by sundown, call the sheriff. The air felt too still. Dad sat on a log, watching the waves like they were going to explain away everything. Mom laid out the sandwiches like she was on a cooking show. Clementine kept checking the boat engine every few minutes. And then I noticed my backpack, gone. It had been next to the cooler when we boarded. Now? Nowhere. I scanned the boat. The engine was idling. The ropes coiled neatly. The dock line looked looser than before. I walked back toward the blanket, but the blanket was empty. No one was there. I turned. The boat was pulling away. I blinked, sure I was imagining it. Wait! Clementine stood at the wheel. He waved. Mom stood behind him, looking away. Dad gave a small nod, almost like a farewell. Hey! I shouted. No response. The boat got smaller. The sound of the motor drowned out everything else. This isn't real, I whispered. This isn't happening. But it was. I stood there, alone, feet in the sand, heart pounding. We just needed space. Cheryl's voice echoed from earlier that morning. Hours passed. No messages, no voices, no signal. Just wind and heat, and the ache that bloomed behind my eyes as the sun climbed higher. I searched the island. Nothing. No shelter, no shade worth mentioning, no water source. My legs throbbed, my throat dried, every step hurt. Every minute felt like a question no one wanted to answer. They didn't panic. They didn't turn around. They didn't forget. They planned this. I thought of Evelyn's voice. I thought of the photo on the wall. They'd already erased me once. This time, they were just finishing the job. By late afternoon, I was crawling under a patch of brush, trying to find a place where the breeze wouldn't burn. My feet were bleeding. I found a stick and carved into a piece of driftwood, Celine Tenton. 6:12 p.m. I was here. It felt ridiculous, primitive, but it also felt necessary. I whispered to the trees, to the waves, to the sky. If no one finds me, let them know I didn't just vanish. And then I lay down, closed my eyes, let the silence wrap around me, and for the first time, I thought it without flinching. They left me to break. I woke to the sound of nothing. Not waves, not birds, just the pulse in my ears and the sand clinging to my skin like regret. My head throbbed, sun pounding down on me as I sat up in the brittle shade I'd crawled into the night before. My throat was sandpaper. My lips cracked when I tried to wet them with my tongue. I scanned the shoreline. No boat, no voices, just an endless horizon that offered no explanation. Maybe they'd come back. Maybe it was all a terrible miscalculation. But then I checked my watch. 4 hours had passed since I'd last seen the Celine star. Still nothing. I tried yelling. At first, strong, then weaker, then just air moving without sound. If this was a misunderstanding, I whispered to the sky, it's a deadly one. I stood, wobbled, then steadied myself and began pacing the island. Not because I thought I'd find anything, but because staying still made the panic louder. With a piece of driftwood, I began drawing a crude map in the sand, marking every tree, every patch of brush. I used rocks to indicate the beach where the boat had last floated. The act of mapping gave me structure, something to hold on to. I searched for anything usable, leaves, sticks. I built a pathetic lean-to with broken branches. It collapsed twice before it stayed upright. My phone had no signal. Battery showed 15%. I turned it off to conserve what was left. My shirt was damp from sweat, but I tied it between 2 branches, hoping dew might gather overnight. It was something my grandfather had once taught me. The air always leaves clues. I found a coconut half buried in sand, the shell rough under my fingers. Took me 30 minutes to crack it open using a sharp shell I'd kept like a knife. The water inside was bitter, but I drank it anyway. I've been through worse, I muttered, sitting against a tree. But this is planned. As the heat rose, my mind wandered to a conversation I had dismissed too quickly. Bob, the dockmaster, just a week ago. They just need her out of the way for a bit, he'd said, laughing while sipping coffee. I thought he meant a break, a family timeout. Now it thundered in my skull. He knew, or at least suspected. Was this a town secret? Something said in passing, never questioned. They talked about this, I hissed, like I was a traffic cone. Something to move out of the way. I felt the fury rise up from my chest, igniting whatever strength the heat hadn't drained from me yet. I gathered rocks, white ones, and started arranging them on the beach into letters. SOS. Then help. I used the shell to write the same on my arm with sunscreen, in case a drone or plane passed over. That evening, I began narrating to myself. Not because I was losing it, but because I wanted it on record. And even if it was just for the trees. Day 1, alone, no food, no water, no boat. I wasn't trying to survive anymore. I was trying to leave a trail. If someone finds me, I said to the wind, they'll know I didn't just vanish. I was left. And the worst part? Still no sound. Still no boat. Still no one. I crossed over to the rocky side of the island. My feet slipped, the ground loose beneath them. I went down hard. My hand scraped against sharp stone, blood blooming instantly. The pain snapped me out of the fog. I tore a piece from my shirt and wrapped it around the wound. It wasn't perfect, but it slowed the bleeding. I'm not going to die here, I said aloud, staggering forward. Not because they didn't want to fill out paperwork. Something flickered in the distance. I stumbled toward it. A fisherman's buoy, old, battered, half-submerged. Inside it, a ruined first aid kit, waterlogged but with a few usable supplies, gauze, alcohol pads, a cracked emergency whistle. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the universe still had a sick sense of humor. I cleaned the wound, wrapped it tighter, and clutched the whistle like it could summon something other than my own voice echoing back. Night fell hard. Mosquitoes arrived like a second betrayal. I crawled under the brush I'd tried to build earlier. It didn't cover much, but it blocked the wind. Sleep was a myth. My body trembled. My stomach ached. But my mind was sharp. I picked up a piece of driftwood and began carving with the shell again. Day 1. Abandoned. I carved it deep. Splinters in my palms. But it stayed. I closed my eyes and pictured Evelyn's face. If you're alive tomorrow, she'd once said, they're already guilty. They were guilty before. But surviving made it harder for them to pretend I'd just disappeared. If I make it through tonight, I whispered, they don't get to finish my story. Then, for the first time since they left, I felt something shift. Not outside. Inside. They left me alone, but I found myself here. I must have dozed off. Or maybe I just stopped counting the minutes, because when I opened my eyes, the moon was high and something was different. A flicker of light across the water. Not fire, not the stars, not my mind playing tricks. A flashlight? I crawled toward it, slow and low, every muscle screaming. The light vanished before I reached the shoreline. Was it real? A hallucination? Then, the sound. A faint mechanical hum. A boat. I grabbed the SOS stick I'd kept near my side and stood, waved it wildly. Didn't scream, didn't cry, just kept waving. Because this island wasn't empty. Not anymore. The light disappeared almost as quickly as it came. 1 second it flickered across the water, barely a blink in the black, and the next, it was gone. I scrambled up the jagged incline at the island's center, barefoot, bleeding, heart punching against my ribs like it had something urgent to say. I held the SOS stick as high as I could, waving it toward the horizon, screaming with a voice already torn raw from hours of shouting into silence. No reply, no boat, no proof that the flicker had ever been real. But it told me one thing. I wasn't completely alone in the world. There was something out there. A light, a boat, a chance. That night, tucked beneath the crooked frame of branches I'd built into something resembling shelter, I pulled the worn leather wallet from my back pocket. It was half soaked in sweat and salt, and I had to peel it open with shaking fingers. Inside, I found it. The photo. My grandfather, standing proud beside his boat, hand resting on the tiller, smile carved into his weathered face like it had never known doubt. I stared at it for a long time, lips pressed to the image. You taught me to steer, even through storms, I whispered. So I'm steering now. The next morning, I circled the island again, this time not as a survivor, but a builder. I needed a vessel, anything to get me off this rock and back to a place where my name still meant something. That's when I saw it. Half buried in the brush near the far cove, tilted at a dangerous angle, sat the remains of a canoe. Storm-ravaged, one side splintered, the bow bent inward, but it floated. Or it could. I spent hours dragging it to shore, dragging my legs with it. Each footstep left a trail behind me, of blood, of mud, of refusal to quit. The sun didn't care. It pressed harder. My back screamed, but I kept going. Back at my shelter, I found 2 pieces of driftwood strong enough to act as braces. I used an old belt to tie them together. My shirt, ripped from the night before, became lining. I tied everything down, fastened it as tight as I could. Then, with a shell, I carved into the side of the hull. Last word. If no one's coming for me, I said out loud, then I'll come for myself. I waited until dawn. The tide would be with me. The wind, too, hopefully. Using limbs I'd shaved down into crude paddles, I launched the canoe from the shore with more pain than ceremony. The sea welcomed me with choppy currents and disinterest. The boat rocked violently. I paddled anyway, not for speed, for direction. Off in the distance, I could make out a tower light, a dot of man-made certainty in a world that had otherwise forgotten me. I aimed for it like it was air, and I'd been drowning. The sun rose behind me. I paddled toward the light. "You're being dramatic," Clementine's voice echoed in my skull. "Too emotional," Mom's voice added. "Unstable," Dad once said, too casually. The words rode the waves with me, hissing in my ear. Maybe I was dramatic. Maybe I was emotional. But dramatic people survived because they didn't pretend it didn't hurt. Emotional people built fires when others froze. "Let them laugh," I muttered, sweat dripping from my forehead. "Let them think I'm crazy." I kept paddling. Eventually, land crept closer. The water calmed as I approached the harbor mouth. I could see the outlines of boats, buildings, lights. I didn't head home. I went straight to Evelyn. Her office lights were still on, even though the sky had gone full dusk. I must have looked like hell. Salt-dried skin, blood-stained clothes, paddles dragging behind me like wings that had broken mid-flight. She opened the door, eyes wide. "Jesus, Celine, where the hell have you been?" I dropped the paddle. "They left me," I said, voice barely holding. "On the island?" Not metaphorically, literally. She went still, expression shifting from horror to fury in seconds. "We need to document everything, tonight." Back at her place, I opened the folder I'd carried for months. I laid it all out. Receipts, the boat title, screenshots, text messages. But I added new things now. A driftwood carving. Day 1. Abandoned. The photo of the canoe. Last word etched into the side. A coconut marked with the date I'd cracked it open to survive. Evelyn looked at everything with the eye of someone who knew exactly what she was building. "This can go two ways," she said. "Civil suit, or criminal, or both." I didn't hesitate. "Both." She nodded. "I don't want revenge," I said, staring out her window. "I want them to never be able to do this again, to me or anyone else." She looked back at me, calm and cold. "This isn't just your story anymore. It's a case." Later that night, Evelyn handed me a burner phone. I turned my old one off completely, changed my email, locked my apartment, ordered a security camera for the dock, installed a GPS tracker under the Celine Stars console. I wasn't just surviving now. I was recording. I was documenting. Every step. At midnight, I opened a brand new journal. First page, in thick ink. Let them laugh. I'm done playing nice. Just as I closed the book, someone knocked at my door. 3 soft taps. I looked through the peephole. Cheryl. She looked tired. No makeup. Hands clasped in front of her. I didn't open the door. She spoke through it anyway. "Honey, we need to talk. Everyone's so worried. Just come home." Silence. Then, "We didn't mean for it to get so out of hand." I pressed my palm to the door, said nothing. Let her words sit in the hallway like the lies they were. I woke before sunrise, my pillow still creased from the weight of last night's silence. The knock on my door, my mother's voice on the other side, it had clung to me through the night like humidity. I didn't answer then. I wouldn't answer now. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and reopened the folder. Everything was still inside, meticulously arranged. Timestamps, screenshots, the printed messages from that family group chat, Evelyn's notes, the photos from the island, even the coconut shell with the date I'd carved into it. My story was no longer just a tangle of memories. It was a documented record. I changed into jeans and a plain navy t-shirt, pulled my hair into a tight ponytail. No makeup, no earrings, no emotion, just function. Before leaving, I texted Evelyn. "Going now. I'll call when I'm done." Her reply was immediate. "Do it now, while it's still hot." I drove in silence, hands steady on the wheel. The sheriff's office sat quiet under the early morning light, the flag barely moving in the breeze. I parked and walked in, folder clutched like armor. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I need to file a report." A few minutes later, I was sitting across from Officer Daniels. Young, clean-shaven, skeptical in that polite, rural North Carolina way. "I'm Celine Tenton," I began, placing the folder on the desk between us. "And I need you to listen carefully." He opened the folder and began flipping. I spoke slowly, clearly. I told him everything: the picnic setup, the way they left, the hours on the island, the makeshift shelter, the hunger, the pain, the carvings in driftwood. I slid the photos across the desk, of my injuries, of the rock formation spelling SOS, of the wrecked canoe with last word etched into its side. Then the video I'd recorded when I paddled back. My voice barely above a whisper. "They left me." Daniels didn't speak for a while. He just kept turning pages. His jaw tightened when he read the group chat logs. "Ms. Tenton," he said finally, adjusting his glasses. "This isn't just betrayal. This could be felony endangerment, possibly premeditated." I nodded. "We'll need to escalate this," he added. "Would you be willing to speak to the judge?" I looked him in the eye. "I'm here, aren't I?" A few hours later, I sat before Judge Hastings, a man in his 60s with a courtroom voice that could break stained glass. He reviewed the documents in silence. My hands remained in my lap until I said the words aloud. "They left me because I said no." It came out quieter than I expected. But when I said it, I felt something shift in the room. The judge looked up. His expression didn't change, but something softened in his shoulders. He approved the motion for a temporary restraining order. "We'll notify them today," he said. I stepped outside into the sunlight. The wind hit my face, and for the first time in days, I didn't flinch. In my car, my burner phone buzzed. "Evelyn." "It's done," I told her. "Good," she replied. "Also, Celine, just so you know, the story's spreading. Local press, possibly regional." I didn't blink. Let them talk. I'm not hiding anymore. After we hung up, I sent a text to Peaches. "Celine, what happens when family becomes dangerous?" Her response came fast. "Peaches, it's time they see you." That afternoon, I drove to Clementine's house. Quiet neighborhood, perfect lawn. I didn't knock. Just walked up to the security camera and placed the envelope beneath it. Inside were printed copies of the folder. At the top, "For every lie you built, I've found proof." I turned and walked away without looking back. You don't need to yell to be loud. That evening, I got the message. An invitation, public, of course. A fundraiser dinner, hosted by my parents. Honoring Clementine for resilience in community development. I showed up in my captain's jacket. Camera in hand. They didn't expect me. The hall was full. Town officials, church ladies, local reporters. Clementine stood at the podium, rehearsed smile in place. "Family means sticking together through hardship," he said, "and I'm honored to—" I walked up the aisle. He faltered. I didn't speak, just walked to the stage, opened the folder, placed it in front of him. The room fell silent. I turned, faced the crowd, and said, "You never have to scream when the truth is heavier than the room." Then I walked out. That night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text. "They're panicking. They didn't think you'd fight." I didn't respond. Another buzz. Text. "Thought you should know. More than one person knew what they were planning." A pause. Text. "Ask Michelle." I stared at the screen. Michelle. Of course. The text stared back at me. "Ask Michelle." I sat in my car outside Evelyn's office, the glow of the screen casting a soft hue across my lap. I hadn't thought of Michelle Inman in years. She'd lived 3 houses down from us growing up. Quiet, always at the window. The kind of neighbor who knew everything, but never said a word unless you asked the right question. I texted Evelyn. "Heading to see Michelle. Wish me courage, not luck." She replied, "Take the folder. And remember, you're not asking for permission anymore." I parked at the edge of Michelle's street and walked the rest of the way. It was early evening. Her porch light was already on. The wooden swing creaked as a breeze passed through, and I saw her silhouette behind the screen door before I knocked. "Celine?" she said, opening it gently, like I might be a ghost she wasn't sure was welcome. Hi, Michelle. Can we talk? She blinked, nodded, and motioned toward the porch. Lemonade? I sat. Sure. She returned with 2 glasses and sat across from me, her knees pulled in tight under her dress. I didn't waste time. Did you hear something before the island? Anything real? Michelle looked down at her hands. I did, but I didn't know how to bring it up without causing trouble. What was it? She hesitated, then said quietly, I overheard your mother talking with Clementine in their backyard. I was gardening. They didn't see me. My chest tightened. What did they say? She said you were acting out again and that maybe some distance would reset her. Clementine laughed. He said, we just need a quiet place to let her realize who's in charge. I gripped the arm of the chair. How long ago? Week before the trip. I closed my eyes. The timeline clicked into place like puzzle pieces I never wanted to own. They meant to leave me. Michelle nodded. I think so. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, flipped to the section labeled Statements. There was one form I hadn't looked closely at before, buried in legal jargon about my supposed mental instability. Did you sign anything for them? I asked. Her eyes widened. They asked me to. Cheryl said it was just a wellness check. Did you? No, but I think someone else did. A neighbor, maybe Bob. He's close to your dad. I pulled out the copy Evelyn gave me, a release form citing temporary voluntary separation due to emotional instability. A signature at the bottom, but not Michelle's. This signature, I said, holding it up. Did you ever see it before? She shook her head. No, but I kept a copy of what they sent me, just in case. She went inside, returned with a thin manila envelope, handed it to me. I thought, maybe someday you'd ask. Back at Evelyn's place an hour later, she laid the 2 documents side by side and stared at the signature. This is felony material, she said flatly. It's not just immoral, it's illegal. She started building the case out loud, more for me than for herself. Medical forgery, premeditated abandonment, false public narrative, emotional manipulation, documented. She paused. You've been collecting receipts. This one breaks the bank. I stared at the pages, then whispered, no more forgiving what they call family tactics. Sunday morning, I walked through the town market. I didn't wear a disguise, didn't avoid eye contact. People saw me. A woman whispered to her husband, That's the one they left. He replied, That's the one that came back. An old man tipped his hat to me. Good morning, Ms. Tenton. Peaches was there too, camera slung across her chest. She caught my eye and nodded, not in pity, but in acknowledgement. I wasn't gossip anymore. I was fact. That afternoon, I mailed a copy of the forged medical document to my parents. No note. Just a sticky tab with 5 words. You know what this is. That night, Cheryl didn't post anything. No dinner photo, no scripture quote, nothing. Clementine made his social profiles private. The silence was louder than all the years of noise combined. But I wasn't done. At home, I pulled the photocopy Michelle had given me, held it under the lamp. Something about the way the pen curled in the signature, it tugged at something in my brain. I reached for the birthday card Dad had given me 5 years ago, the one I never threw out. Opened it, studied the way the letters looped, the S in Celine, the angle of the T in Tenton. Same, exactly the same. He signed it. Dad signed the release. I sat back, the air sucked out of the room. He didn't yell, he didn't argue, he just signed me away. Evelyn hit the spacebar, and the sound started again. Clementine's voice filled the quiet room. His laugh, too loud, soaked in liquor, bled through the speakers. I mean, seriously, he slurred. Getting rid of Celine was easier than I thought. She practically stranded herself. Background laughter. Someone else chimed in. Your folks really backed you up. Of course they did. Dad signed it. Mom just said to make it clean. You know how she is. My hands were clenched around my knees, nails digging into denim. Evelyn didn't flinch. She hit pause. They recorded their own confession. I said, voice flat. She nodded, calm as ever. We back this up 3 times. Cloud. External. Flash drive. This is our trump card. We'd already been building a case, but this changed the tone. Now we weren't just drawing timelines. We were submitting Exhibit A. I labeled the USB in black Sharpie. Exhibit A. Audio proof. The next morning, we drove to the courthouse. Evelyn walked straight to the clerk's desk, filed the motion, and handed over the drive. A deputy passing by caught a snippet from the paperwork. He glanced at me, then back at Evelyn. You may want to request a protective order too. If what's in that file is accurate, things might get loud. Evelyn didn't hesitate. We're filing one today. I watched the clerk stamp everything with practiced indifference. The system doesn't blink, even when someone's life is hanging in the ink. When we walked out, the sunlight was sharper. I felt lighter. This wasn't family drama anymore. It was evidence. By Friday, the whispers in town shifted. I noticed it first at the cafe. Less side-eye, more curiosity. Less whisper, more weight. A waitress, Marlene, mid-60s, always wore cherry earrings, refilled my coffee without a word, then leaned in. Some of us always knew, honey. We just didn't say. I nodded. That's the thing about silence. It keeps everyone safe. Until it doesn't. Later that day, Peaches published a column. The courage to return from erasure. She didn't name names, but she didn't need to. Local women started resharing it. A librarian posted, I know this woman, she's the real thing. A former teacher commented, finally, someone's saying it. I didn't engage, just watched. Let the momentum speak for itself. Let them talk, I told Evelyn. The truth outruns the noise. That evening, Cheryl called me. 6 times. I didn't pick up. Then Clementine posted on Facebook. There are 2 sides to every story, he wrote, under a selfie of him in his office, looking solemn. I screenshot the court docket and posted it in the comments. No caption. 10 minutes later, he deleted the post. By Monday, Cheryl had stopped posting her daily devotionals. Clementine's business page vanished. Even Bobby was seen driving alone, slow, windows up. Someone told me he stopped going to church. They're starting to taste the consequences, Evelyn murmured. I didn't smile, just nodded. Justice wasn't a celebration, it was a reckoning. When the town hall meeting rolled around that Thursday, Evelyn and I walked in without saying a word. I wore my navy blazer. Not armor, just presence. Clementine was already seated. He looked up, did a double take. His jaw clenched. The room wasn't packed, but it didn't need to be. During the QA, someone from the back stood. Ms. Tenton, would you like to say anything? I stood, folder in hand, walked slowly to the front. I already said it, I replied, setting the folder on the table. In affidavits, in police reports, in survival logs, and in court. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Another followed. It spread, quietly, but it spread. Clementine stood, face unreadable, and walked out. Evelyn leaned over and whispered, "Let silence be their legacy." The next morning, I walked down to the marina. A new sign hung by the gate. Restricted access. Legal owner only. I showed my ID, unlocked the dock, and stepped onto the Celine Star for the first time since everything. I walked the deck slowly, checked every corner, sat in the captain's seat. Tucked behind the steering console, I left a note. What was mine will remain mine. I won't be erased again. Then I climbed the small ladder and replaced the old flag with a red and white one my grandfather used when teaching me to sail. It flapped in the wind like it had been waiting for this moment. That night, after dinner, I checked the mail. A single envelope. No return address. Inside, a folded sheet of paper. In block letters. You think this is over? It's just getting started. No name. No handwriting I recognized. I held the paper for a while. My fingers didn't shake. I looked out the window toward the dark waves. Then so am I whispered. Dawn came soft and salt blue. I stepped onto the Celine Star with a bucket, a brush, and a quiet I'd earned the hard way. I knelt at the bow and started to scrub. Slow circles, soap, then rinse. The deck grew brighter under my hands. My shoulders loosened with each pass. Flashbacks tried to surface. The island, the thirst, the stillness that felt like a verdict. I let them roll through and out, like waves passing under the hull. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. This boat didn't save me, I said out loud, voice steady. I saved me. I checked the lines, retied the stern cleat with a clean figure 8, pulled a new length of rope from the locker, cut it neat, replaced the frayed one I'd been tolerating out of habit. I tugged hard, solid. My phone buzzed. Evelyn. Court calendars posted, she said. Hearing dates set, faster than I expected. Good, I said. The longer truth sits, the heavier it gets. Are you breathing? She asked. I'm cleaning, I said. Close enough. I put the phone away and wiped the rails until I could see a clear shine. I was reclaiming more than fiberglass. I was washing away the parts of me that still asked permission. Bootsteps thudded on the dock. Slow, familiar. I looked up. Dad. He stopped at the gate and didn't come aboard. He took off his cap, turned it in his hands, then looked past me at the open water. Morning, he said. Morning? He stared at the boat a long time. Not at me, at her. I didn't know they'd go that far, he said finally. I set the brush in the bucket. You didn't stop them either. He flinched, just a little. I thought it would shake out. I thought that I'd give in. I kept my tone even. You were counting on the old version of me. He exhaled, jaw working. Then he reached into his jacket and held out a small envelope. What's that? Things that should have been yours all along, he said. I'm not asking for anything. I didn't take it. Not yet. Put it on the post, I said. He nodded. Set it on the bollard like it might bite him. He looked small on the dock, and I didn't know what to do with that. I won't be at the hearings, he said. It's not my place. You made it your place when you signed my name away. He closed his eyes once. I'm sorry, he said. Are you? I asked. Silence stretched. He looked down at his hands. I'm sorry, he repeated, and this time the words landed, not as absolution, but as record. He touched the brim of his cap. Take care, Celine. You too, I said. He walked off the dock. No hug. No, see you soon. Just absence that, for once, didn't wound. I watched him go, then opened the envelope. A photograph slid into my palm. Me at 8, barefoot on this deck, my hair a wild flag. Behind it, the original ownership paper, unaltered, never signed over. I breathed in and let it out slow. I put both under the chart table, not as trophies, as truth. I wiped my hands and drove to the paper. Peaches was at her desk, sleeves rolled, a pencil behind her ear. She looked up, took one look at me, and grinned. You look lighter, she said. I feel finished, I said. Not with the process, with the begging. She stood and hugged me with a reporter's economy. You didn't just survive. You made silence expensive for them. I laughed once. You always know where to aim. She motioned me into a chair. Males coming in daily, women, men, adult kids, folks who left home at 60. You cut a path. Good, I said. Paths are meant to be used. She tilted her head. What now? I've been thinking, I said, about leaving town. Her brows lifted. To run? To grow. I smiled. There's a difference. Peaches spun the pencil in her fingers. Staying would be the easy thing now, she said. People are on your side, but easy's never been your language. I'll give you a forwarding address, I said. You better, she said, and wrote postcard on a sticky note like it was a legal contract. Back in my car, my phone pinged. Group message from Cheryl. Cheryl. We'd like to have one final dinner, for closure. I stared at the screen. Then another. Clementine. Let's not drag this out anymore. I forwarded the messages to Evelyn. She called immediately. Don't go if it's for them, she said. You don't owe a performance. I might go, I said, but not for them. For you. For the chapter. To close it with a period, not a question mark. Evelyn sighed. Then go in your car, park on the street, sit near the door, stay 10 minutes, and take nothing you're not willing to leave behind. I smiled. You know me too well. I do, she said, and I want you free when it's over. I texted back to the group. Me. I'll come. I won't stay long. Their house looked the same but smaller. The porch plants were trimmed to perfection. The windows gleamed. Everything was staged. Clementine opened the door. Too smooth. Sis, he said, like we hadn't stood on opposite sides of a docket. Clementine. Mom appeared, smile bright enough to blind. There she is, our brave girl. I'm not here for applause, I said. Of course not, she said, stepping aside. Come in. Dad sat on the edge of the sofa. He lifted a hand. Didn't speak. The table was set precisely. White plates, cloth napkins, silver that caught the light, a roast, potatoes, green beans with almonds, my favorite as a kid. We sat. No grace, just the scrape of forks pretending to be normal. Mom poured water. We thought it would help to remember the good. I took one bite, set the fork down. This isn't closure, I said. Mom's smile tightened. We're trying, Celine. This is rehearsal, I said, for the story you want to tell other people once I'm gone. Clementine leaned back, hands up. No one's acting. Then you'll appreciate the script, I said, and laid a copy of the court notice on the table. Dates, orders, stipulations, it's all in there. Mom's face fell. You brought paperwork to dinner? I brought boundaries, I said. On paper. Dad cleared his throat. We know what the court says. Good, I said. Then I don't have to. Silence held for a beat. Mom softened her voice. Can't we at least agree to... No, I said gently. We can't agree to pretend. Clementine rubbed his jaw. So that's it? That's it, I said. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. I stood, pushed my chair in, didn't slam anything, didn't raise my voice. I walked to the door. Mom followed. Celine, please. I turned. Mom, listen carefully. I'll heal. You decide what you want to do with that. Her eyes shone. She nodded, just once. I opened the door, stepped into the evening air, and let it close behind me. The click sounded like a lock finding home. At my kitchen table, I pulled the journal I'd carried across deserts and courtrooms. I turned to the last page, wrote, They chose silence. I chose voice. I dated it, closed the cover, set the journal in a drawer and slid it shut. I didn't need it for survival anymore. I needed it for history, and history could wait. I designed a small plaque on my laptop and sent it to the engraver online. Celine Tenton, Captain. When the mock-up came back, I smiled. Not because of the title, because of the period at the end. That night, I sat on the seawall and watched the water work out its arguments with the moon. The wind had no edge. Neither did I. 2 days later, a plain envelope landed in my mailbox. No return address. Familiar stationery. Inside, one line in a hand I knew better than my own. You were right. We just didn't want to admit it. See, no grand confession. No apology that asked for a response. Just a sentence that tried to move back into my house. I held the letter over the kitchen sink. My lighter clicked. The flame licked the paper, curled it inward, turned it to lace and then to ash. Some truths aren't meant to be framed, I said to the smoke. Just lived. I ran the tap, watched the last dark flecks whirl and vanish. My phone buzzed. Peaches. You good? I typed back. Good enough to start again. I stood at the window, looking out at the Celine star as she rocked lightly against her lines. The flag I'd raised swung in a kind breeze. Somewhere out past the inlet, a gull cried, and the sound didn't pull me backward. It pointed forward. Sunrise laid a thin gold path across the marina. I stood on the dock with coffee steaming against the morning chill and the Celine Star rocking lightly beside me. For the first time in months, the water looked like what it was. Water. Not a memory. Not a threat. Evelyn arrived in flats and a windbreaker, hair pulled back, a folder tucked under her arm. She didn't waste words. She handed me the final stack of documents. "Read it," she said. I skimmed, then slowed. Clementine accepted the plea. "Community service, 180 hours, she said, and a public apology at the courthouse steps." I traced the line with my finger. "Cheryl, fines for falsifying records." Evelyn tapped the last page. "And Bobby's affidavit. Handwritten. He admits he signed behind your back." I exhaled. Justice isn't flashy. "No," she said. "It's official." We stood there, listening to the flag pop once in the breeze. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm anchored," I said. "Good. Because today we'll move." "It already did," I said, and folded the papers back into the folder. By lunch, I was in a small studio 3 blocks from the harbor. Peaches clipped a microphone to my collar and adjusted the light. No makeup, no script, just voice. "Ready?" she asked. "Go," I said. She hit record. "Celine, why tell this now?" "Because silence built the road that took me to that island," I said. "They didn't just want my boat. They tried to erase my place in my own life." She nodded. "What saved you?" "I did," I said. "And a few people who believed evidence beats performance." She smiled at that. "Anything you want to say to people listening?" "Yes," I said. "If you think you're overreacting, start documenting. If you think you're alone, tell one honest person. If your family calls that betrayal, ask why truth scares them." We cut. 15 minutes, no edits, no drama. Peaches uploaded the episode that afternoon. By dinner, my inbox filled. "A retired teacher. Your story helped me confront my son's control of my finances." "A father in Ohio. I believed my daughter when others didn't. Thank you for telling the rest of us how to be better." "A woman in her 70s. Your courage gave me permission to leave what was hurting me. I sat at my kitchen table and read until the lines blurred. This had never been just about me. I felt it as clearly as the tide under the hull. Other people were moving too." The next morning, Evelyn met me at the DMV. No drama there either. A woman at the counter checked the order, compared it to the record, and printed the new title on crisp paper. She slid it across the glass like a flag lowered at sunset. "Glad to see it going back to the right hands," she said. "Me too," I said, and meant it. I updated the registration, wrote it plainly. "Primary use, private captain advocacy." Evelyn raised a brow. "Advocacy?" "They used my boat to erase me," I said. "I'll use it to help others stay afloat." That afternoon, I drove to the house I grew up in. I parked at the curb and walked to the gate. I didn't ring. I waited. Cheryl opened the door first. She gripped the frame like it might steady her. "Celine," she said. "Mom." We stood in the kind of quiet that used to swallow me whole. It didn't now. "I'm not coming in," I said. "I'm closing a loop." She nodded once, eyes bright. I held out a small cardboard box. "Photos, my old key, the last of what I left here." She didn't take it at first. Then she did. Our fingers didn't touch. I added a note on top. "This is everything I used to carry. You can keep it. I'm carrying myself now." Her mouth opened, then closed. She stepped back a fraction. You don't have to," I said. "Not now." Behind her, Dad sat on the porch swing. He didn't speak. He watched the yard like it might say something useful. I met his eyes. He looked down. I turned. Walked away. The gate latch clicked, clean and small. It sounded like a lock sliding into the right notch. Movement wants a place to go. Mine took me 2 blocks down to a storefront with a faded "for lease" sign. The rent wasn't cheap. The view of the harbor made up for it. I signed. Painted the walls myself. White, simple, bright. I hung one photo. Me on the island, arms raised to flag down a boat that might have been real or just hope with a flashlight. On the door, I taped a paper sign, the Driftline Project. Our first workshop filled on a Thursday evening. Folding chairs, a pot of coffee, no icebreaker, no share your story in 3 sentences. I started with tools, safety planning, document templates, a letter format that says no, like a lawyer without suing yet. A woman in the front row lifted her hand. What do we do if our family never apologizes? We stop waiting, I said. We live. She nodded. So did 3 others. One cried without sound. I slid a box of tissues across the table. We kept going. 2 weeks in, I took the Selene Star out alone. The sky was an uncomplicated blue. I tied my grandfather's bandana in my hair, locked the cabin, and eased the throttle forward. The engine purred. The wake trailed like a clean signature. Near the GPS marker that matched the island, I cut the engine and drifted. I took a small river stone from my pocket, wrapped in a copy of the court order, and held it over the side. Here lies everything they did, I said, quiet. Sunk. Not forgotten, but never in control again. I released it. The paper darkened. The bundle dropped. A circle of ripples moved out, then disappeared into the larger pattern. I turned the wheel and headed back. The channel markers lined up green and red like a simple instruction. Keep to your side and proceed. As I docked, I saw her, young, maybe 20, standing at the ramp with a worn folder clutched to her chest. She avoided my eyes until I stepped onto the planks. Miss Tenton? She asked. That's me, I said. She swallowed. I need help. I think my parents are doing to me what yours did to you. I studied her, trembling hands, a bruise half hidden by makeup, a posture that said fight and flight at the same time. What's your name? I asked. Lena. Okay, Lena, I said, and gestured to the boat. Let's talk, but not on land. She hesitated, then nodded. I held her elbow as she stepped aboard. She sat on the bench, hugged the folder to her ribs, and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a year. I untied the stern line first, then the bow. The rope laid down soft on the deck. I pushed us off with a palm against the piling and eased the throttle just enough to clear. Lena stared at the water. What if they say I'm overreacting? They will, I said. We write anyway. What if they threaten to take my car? Title check. Copies. 1 at your friend's house. 1 with me. What if they say I'm ungrateful? I met her eyes. You can be grateful for life and still refuse to hand it over. The wind lifted a strand of her hair. She didn't push it back. She let it fly. I angled the bow toward open water. The engine hummed. The town receded a little. My boat, still mine, carried 2 people now, both headed away from something that used to claim ownership. They wanted me quiet, I said, and Lena glanced up. What did you become? She asked. I smiled at the horizon, where the sky made a bright, plain promise. A lighthouse.